I think we better make a start. First of all, welcome everyone here this morning. I'm so glad to see so many faces here. So I just told Jordan, it must be him attracting all the crowd, people coming to listen to him. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin Yu. In fact, I'm not from Poly. In fact, I'm from Baptist University. In this talk, actually it is actually organized by what we call COP. And this COP is because of this project, a UGC funded project on teaching and learning project on service learning, in which PolyU is the lead institution. But apart from PolyU and Baptist University, we also have England University and Education University. So I think it's really good that the four universities come together to work on service learning, hopefully to empower and to encourage more of our colleagues to engage in service learning. Okay. So we're also grateful that PolyU and the COP and especially the Office of Service Learning organize this conference. So it gives us a platform, to learn from one another. Okay. So without much further ado, I'll pass the time to Jordan. But before I speak, just let me introduce him briefly. Okay, he's a mechanical engineering by training, but he has told me he has stopped practicing mechanical engineering and he's doing something more interesting, namely water supply and internationalization. Okay, so without much further ado, I'll pass the time to him, and he's going to talk about community partnership and sustainability. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for that introduction. Certainly it's the topic that is drawing so much attention and such a good audience here. My name is Jordan Ermilio. I teach at Villanova University. It's a university outside of Philadelphia. It's about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia in the United States. I started the engineering service learning program at Villanova as a volunteer, as a graduate student in about 2004. And that has since evolved into what's now my full-time role there in Villanova as the director of that program. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here and want to thank everybody, particularly the people at Polytechnic University and the COP partners for hosting me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And please, I want to make sure that throughout the course of the next few days, I get a chance to talk to everybody, even individually. I really want to hear about your work and what you're doing, because I think this is a really exciting area and very excited to learn, and it's important to learn from each other with this type of work. So maybe a little bit more about my personal background. I did study at Villanova University. I studied my undergraduate in mechanical engineering. Without a doubt, it was a challenge. Thermodynamics is one of the toughest courses on the planet. And so I had similar challenges to others in this audience that studied mechanical engineering. After that, I decided to, what I learned from my undergraduate studies was I really reflected on what was important to me. I think this is an important thing whenever you're doing service or outreach. When I realized that there was three things that were motivating me. One was the engineering design. I really enjoyed the engineering process. The second was doing humanitarian work, things that engaged people in meaningful work to help others. And the third was international and working multicultural type of settings. So I promised myself, coming out of my undergraduate studies, and this took a lot of reflection and meditation to get to those three things that were really motivating me. I decided to say yes to every single opportunity that presented those three criteria. I was going to say yes to every opportunity regardless of where it led me. And so initially, that process led me to a place called Loughborough University, where they do research and postgraduate work on water in developing communities. that further led me to joining the Peace Corps. That's a U.S. Volunteer agency that does international development work in other countries. So I lived in the Philippines for 3 years, working in northern Luzon, a very remote part of the country, working on water supply and sanitation type of projects as a Peace Corps volunteer. Then I sort of continued to do some work in international development with an organization called Oxfam. I was working in East Timor at that time. Does anyone know where East Timor is? Okay, so when I asked that question in the U.S., everybody says no. But so now I'm home again. I'm home here in Asia again. I love it because people really know where East Timor is. But this was at the turn of the century when all of that conflict was occurring in East Timor. It was a big UN mission there. So I was working with Oxfam International in East Timor doing reconstruction, schools, water supply, sanitation type facilities. And then I ended up going back to school again to do my master's in water resources engineering, and have since returned back to Loughborough to do my PhD work. And if I sort of follow this cycle, soon enough I'll be back with Oxfam eventually. So that's a little bit of background about my work, mostly in water supply and some renewable energy that I engaged in. But without a doubt, the biggest project I've ever worked on in my entire life, I'm designing humans in my own house. This is my 7-year-old daughter, my 10-year-old son, and my wife, Annie, who's Filipino, and our puppy. His name is Oreo. Okay, so this is a workshop type of session. So I wanted to introduce a question at the beginning to give everyone some time to think about the question so that once we have time to break out and to discussion groups, you'll have thought about it at least a little bit. So the question here is, what are the most important characteristics, or you might say elements, of a successful and you might say sustainable partnership between university service programs and international organizations? Now, international organizations could mean any type of nonprofit. It could even be local, depending on the nature of your particular work. But this is a question that I'd like to pose as a way to facilitate some knowledge in the room from people's personal experience. And so if you could each identify one characteristic or one element of what you consider a best practice in terms of working with or sustainable partnerships or successful partnerships working with nonprofit humanitarian type of organizations. Perhaps I'll give everyone a few minutes to just think about it a little bit. I think there's some paper here. And I think if everyone just writes down one, there's no right or wrong answers, right? It'll be an effective way of kind of sharing and learning from each other after the presentation. Okay, so I think it's maybe a good idea to continue to think about it. We'll have a chance maybe for 10 minutes after the presentation and after some I'm going to share my experience with everybody. So you can also write things down as I speak if you have your own ideas, or if I say something that sparks a particular thought, please, feel free to write it down. Or even if you have questions, at some point, it might be worth it to just use these cards since it's a big group. And maybe if we have time, towards the end, we'll try to do some questions. That makes sense? Okay. So, again, my name is Jordan Ermilio. I'm the director of the Engineering Service Learning Program at Villanova. It is an engineering-focused service learning program. We have 14 partners in 10 different countries. Our partners span everywhere from Central America and South America to Africa and quite a bit in Asia. We've had partnerships in the past in the Philippines. We've done some projects in Thailand in the past as well. But those are not ongoing projects at the moment. So at the moment we have 14 partners in 10 different countries. This is a little snapshot of what I think are some of our best practices in our program. essentially some of those elements of sustainable partnerships. And I really break it down into two different categories, the program partner and then the academic nature of the work as being some key characteristics of success. First and foremost, I think one of the key characteristics that I've defined is that working with program partners who have the capacity to implement projects is an important element of certainly sustainability, certainly engagement, but that's a very unique thing. Doesn't necessarily happen by accident. So working with partners that are focused on implementing community development projects, and then our teams are providing technical support in service to that organization. Our teams, to be honest with you, do not really implement projects. We don't engage in community development work. Our partners are community development experts. They implement projects. We provide technical support to those organizations. We participate in implementation, but we are not in the critical path of implementation, which is a challenge in a lot of university outreach initiatives, because you see these problems all over in the community and you want to initially solve the problem. And then the initial instinct is to engage immediately with the community to start solving that problem. But then it puts the student teams in a different role, where students are really involved and the value is the learning opportunity that it presents. They now become community development practitioners, which is a little outside the scope of a young professional who's really in an academic institution. So I think that's an important, very, very important piece. I think to supplement that, sort of engaging with partners that appreciate the need for education of young professionals, mentoring young professionals in this type of work. There's certainly plenty of organizations out there that can really appreciate that they're engaged in an educational initiative, and as long as they can appreciate that and they sort of appreciate the need to mentor the students in that process and introduce them to the issues and the challenges, then I think that's usually a good partnership. They certainly would need some type of external support. And they also appreciate the value that academic institutions can bring in terms of research and capacity building or training. Right? In academia, I perceive the role of academia to do research. Faculty in every institution are working on research, and they're also working on education, training. Right? So sort of doing what you do well, if your partner appreciates those things, then I think that's an element of a good, successful partnership. In terms of academic programs in service learning, I think having credit-bearing type of initiatives is a very important thing. Certainly volunteerism is a very important component to service and outreach. But I like to say that credit in academia, credit is currency, right? And you get what you pay for, right? You've heard that expression, you get what you pay for, right? So in academia, credit is currency, right? And that's really what motivates students quite a bit. And certainly, if there's a volunteer engagement of some kind, and exams come into play, or midterm exams, or projects, classroom projects, that will always take the priority to the volunteer engagement and project that students are working on. So I think we have to be a little bit aware of that dynamic with students and make sure that we're working with credited type of initiatives. Integrating projects into the classroom, I found is a very effective way of engaging students in that learning opportunity. For example, bringing a live case project into a class that will typically do like a case study type of project in their course. Bringing in a live case project is a very good way of integrating a live case service type of situation into a course, into an existing class. It's basically like an introduction to these type of projects. Depth and breadth. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but having depth to the opportunity as well as breadth. In other words, you can engage a lot of students but you can also engage students in a very deep, engaging type of experience that has more than just check the box type of service outreach and engagement, right? Sort of the what's next type of question, right? Students might engage with the community for a 1-week immersion type of experience, but then what's next? So the what's next is where you start to add depth to the program. Partnership approach. In other words, I think as academics, as faculty, as researchers, we should be more focused on the partnerships and building partnerships rather than building projects. And I think that's a much more sustainable way of developing programs. And of course, I think maybe this is the most important element of any type of engagement in service and outreach. And I have an expression that having expertise in community development or international humanitarian work means understanding the importance of humility. Because that's where the listening takes place. It's that humbling experience, because every time you solve one problem, you realize that there's 3 or 4 more. Or every time you answer one question, every solution gets 3 more problems. Right? So it's going through that type of experience over time is very humbling. You realize that there's always 3, 4, 10 times the amount of things that you don't know than what you do know. So it's that sort of exploration and knowledge building which really becomes a humbling type of experience. And I think that sort of is key to that characteristic of the people involved in terms of how you engage with communities, how you engage with partners, and having humility in all of that. So, in our engineering service learning program, we have 3 types of opportunities or engagements and initiatives that we really work on. 3 types, and I think this is one of the keys to our success, is sort of maintaining these very clear, distinct classifications and types of engagement. The first one is what I call a partner-driven initiative, right? That's the community development work. Our partners are driving that work. They're in the field 24/7, engaged in community development work in a continuous way. Right, that's really how community development is effective. You know, having one-off, 1-week trips to work on a community development project is not an effective way of doing community work. So having a partner-driven initiative that focuses on community development is one of the types of activities that our students engage in. And we provide technical support to those organizations. For example, in this particular scenario here, this is in northern Luzon in the Philippines. Our partner here is trying to take this irrigation canal where they flood the fields. There's rice terraces in this part of the country. And what they're doing is they're trying to convert this irrigation canal into mechanical energy for the purposes of milling rice, so that during the planting season, they can flood the fields and do planting. And during the harvest season, they don't need that water. They can convert it into milling, hydromechanical energy for milling rice, and use it to mill rice. So our teams are sort of assessing the hydropotential energy in this particular system for the purposes of furthering their project. Right? We're not in there designing or building the system. We've certainly participated and helped out with the design. We helped out with the data collection and doing the analysis, but our partner was implementing the project. A second type would be a faculty-driven initiative. This is where our faculty and students too participate, and our partners in a research project or capacity building type of initiative, where our faculty, our students are coming to do a capacity building type of workshop with our partners, with the communities that they serve. We facilitate knowledge within the groups, and we help to do trainings of the water operators or the community development professionals, right? And furthermore, doing research in that space is a key area where faculty drive that effort. The faculty are in charge of it. And then of course we have student-driven initiatives. This is where the innovation and creativity comes in. Students can be innovative around a particular design challenge that they face. And at the end of the day, 80% of those student-driven initiatives expire when the students graduate, right? 80% of them don't actually see the field. It only takes several years of iteration of a particular project before it's ready to be used in the field. This is a challenge, I think, because to some extent, anyone who engages with community development work in impoverished areas, in developing communities, we have to be very careful about the ethics of introducing new technologies to invulnerable communities, in that these technologies are not necessarily tested, right? We're basically converting these low-income developing communities into micro labs for testing our new products or initiatives or innovations, right? And I think that's a very, very challenging type of thing in terms of the ethics of service learning. And in my opinion, we have to be very, very careful about that as a community of practice. So this particular project here, our partners and the students working in Cambodia were identified mine action, landmines, and unexploded ordnance is a big issue in Cambodia. And it just so happens that our partners in Cambodia are actual experts in this particular field. And we gave our students a design challenge to design an explosive ordnance disposal robot. Basically a remote control vehicle with web cameras and data transmission and so on to operate and provide extra safety in that mine action remediation process. But it was about 4 or 5 years of design with a number of groups of different students before we even introduced this in the field. And even then, it was introduced in a testing facility, not in live scenarios, right? And so now we're at the process of trying to manufacture this locally in country in order to start to influence mine action in the general sector of mine action. So we have to be very careful about these student-driven initiatives. Okay, this goes to that depth and breadth chart that I was talking about. And this is a summary of the number of students who engaged in different types of initiatives in 1 year. So this is a summary of the 2018 academic year. And this integrated service projects, this is where we introduce live case projects into a classroom. In engineering, this is like fluid mechanics is a common course in engineering where students are studying the dynamics of fluid as it moves. And pipe flow hydraulics is a particular subject. And it might be one lecture in the entire semester of a fluid mechanics course. But we would introduce live case projects around community development work to get students to look at some of the analysis of some of the systems that we were planning to implement. So there's no further engagement other than the classroom at this level. So you can get a breadth of student participation, but you're not getting much depth in terms of the experience. The international immersion and field work, we put together 1-credit seminar courses. We literally teach these classes in a very similar room to this. And every Friday afternoon, our teams meet together for 2 hours. On one side of the room is the team doing STEM outreach in Cambodia. And the other side of the room, students that are doing a water supply project in Madagascar. Another part of the room, they're doing the explosive ordnance project or some type of community bridge or transportation project in different countries. And we all meet together for 2 hours. We have about a 30-minute lecture topic. And then they break into their team meetings for the next hour, hour and a half, depending. And they plan their projects in that sort of one credit. In the US, we use 3 credits. There's 3 credits for every course. So this is kind of like a laboratory type of design lab type of class, but it's a 1-credit course, and they meet once a week for 2 hours. And as a part of that class, during that semester, they're going to be traveling. These teams will travel and spend 1 or 2 weeks in the field with our partner, collecting data, organizing some things, looking into different projects and so on, as a part of that class. So this is where the field immersion takes place. At the present time, right now, we have 6 students in Indonesia working on a renewable energy project around agricultural biomass conversion, taking agricultural waste and converting it into usable fuel. We have another team of 7 students in Cambodia working on a STEM project. We have a team in Ecuador right now working on a project, a renewable energy photovoltaic system. We have 2 teams in India, one doing a water project and the other doing a STEM project. And all of those students were in this 1-credit seminar course. And so we have periods of time where our students will travel and engage in different projects, and we made sure that we have this 1-credit type of component to that. The next level of depth would be senior design courses. In that sense, last year we had 84 students involved in those type of projects. And senior design is a 2-semester course where students will work on a particular design challenge. The explosive ordnance robot, the EOD robot in Cambodia, was a part of this senior design project. Our partners, our faculty, even sometimes the students themselves, identify a particular design challenge and work on that project in a team setting, usually 4 or 5 students per team, for 2 whole semesters, trying to engage in some type of humanitarian technology initiative. Summer internships. This is where students will spend 2 months in the field with one of our partner organizations, volunteering, building their leadership capacity. We also put together year of service assignments. These are for those students that at the end of their graduation, every year, we graduate, our students graduate in May. Every year, around April, a handful of students, 3 or 4, come to me and they say, I don't know what to do after we graduate. I'm not excited about any of the opportunities I have. The thing that excited me most about engineering was doing this international work. How can I continue to do that? So we set up year of service assignments where those students can actually volunteer with our partner for an entire year. They become liaisons for these other groups, right? They introduce live case projects and case studies that we can actually integrate back in. They host teams when they come and they arrive, and they help do all the planning and preparation for the teams that are coming. And it's a really effective way of engaging and adding depth to those experiences. And the furthest depth that we've developed is through research projects. What we did was we developed scholarships for our graduate programs. In engineering, we have graduate programs in civil, mechanical, electrical, computer, chemical, and sustainable engineering is another graduate program that we have. And we put together scholarships. So we have a handful of scholarships, about 5 every year, for anybody who has three things. Prior experience working internationally in a humanitarian sector, at least 1 year. Perfect candidates, right? Previous experience in engineering, or educational background in engineering, and some foreign language fluency. So if they have those 3 criteria, they can get a full scholarship to do their graduate program, to study at their master's. And they become the team leaders for these groups. So it's a really effective way of building bandwidth for our organization and engaging with students because they're qualified. They're very, very qualified people because they have prior experience doing humanitarian work. And so this past year we had 8, and that's double counted because of 2 semesters. So this is, when you sort of look at these numbers, these are not necessarily the number of students, but the number of students who participated. In other words, one student could be counted 1, 2, 3 times even, if they participated in different levels. Okay, so I thought it'd be nice to also share a little bit of history about our program and where it started. This is what our program looked like in 2008. We had 1 senior design project. I was working as an adjunct faculty, which basically means I was volunteering. Anybody who's done adjunct faculty work means you're not getting paid, really. So I was volunteering to do this work. We had 1 senior design team working on 1 project in 1 place. In 2011, after 3 years of volunteering, I was brought in as the director of this program, and we started to integrate projects into the classroom a little bit more closely, but we still only had 2 partners. In 2014, we had formally established the Engineering Service Learning Program. We had a number of partners in different places. We started to investigate opportunities around research as a service, looking at research in a humanitarian space and providing research projects and looking at research projects as a service outreach type of initiative. In 2018, we've established some corporate partnerships. This is a very grayed out type of area because we only have 1. We have some alumni sponsors, alumni that support our programs annually, some endowments that we've used. This is where alumni will give a large amount of money, and you can use the interest from that. That money gets invested, and you can use the interest from that sponsorship to run your program. We have 1 foundation partner. We have 1 grant, but that's very much year to year. We have some university partners. We're starting to explore that much further. And certainly a lot more established in our research area. And then, of course, what we're calling the 2020 vision. For anybody who wears glasses, you know how the importance of 2020 vision is. So our 2020 vision is to really, really establish our university partnerships and to really establish this type of sponsorship to really further our program, and perhaps what might be called a community of practice. That's a great, I love that. You're already doing it. So we're trying to really establish that ourselves as well as part of our 2020 vision. Okay, now before I kind of turn it over to the discussion topic, I'd like to share with you a little bit about the research and some of the tools that we're using in terms of monitoring sustainability. Sustainability is certainly an enormous challenge in anyone who's doing international outreach work. Sustainability is probably, I think, in my mind, where universities and university and academic institutions can really, really add value to what international program partners are doing. Because we can kind of look from the outside in and investigate sustainability issues somewhat holistically and independently from the everyday challenges of development and community humanitarian work. Right? Our partners are often, I find, putting out fires, right? Addressing like immediate needs, right? Just trying to keep the water flowing, right? Whereas we, as external people, can really stop for a second, look at sustainability issues more holistically, and really address those issues and help them to address those issues in a much more effective way. So I think sustainability challenge is really a good type of initiative for academic institutions to really engage in. So we've developed 3 tools. I'm not going to elaborate on these tools any further, but I can share with you a little bit about it, and then perhaps where there's questions or if we want to have some discussion later during the next several days, I can share with you a lot of the details about it. But using sustainability discussion groups, using something called the Delphi method. Delphi method is a methodology that's gotten developed in social sciences for really sort of establishing what's called consensus amongst groups of people. It's traditionally used in more like expert panel type of discussion pieces. But I have a philosophy, particularly when it comes to that humility, that nobody is better qualified to understand and solve the problem than the people who are living the problem, right? As external entities, I would even pose that we're not qualified to even understand the problem because we don't live the problem. So, you know, where you can actually develop solutions from within the community, that's a much more effective way of doing community development and service. And that's the same way that this Delphi method sort of uses. It's a tool for establishing consensus amongst the group. And developing, what we've used is we've modified this Delphi method to be, it's about a 2-day process in a workshop type of setting where teams and groups will develop what they call sustainability plans. Right, so initially it's about identifying the sustainability challenges. What are those challenges to sustainability, and getting their input and sharing and brainstorming around potential issues, and then establishing some consensus around the most important issues, and then developing strategic plans to address those sustainability challenges. So interestingly enough, the topic for today was about how do we monitor sustainability with our projects? And the answer is we don't. We facilitate a process with our partners and with the communities to empower them to monitor their sustainability. Right? It's a little bit of a different approach. Performance monitoring using continuous and objective methods. This is sort of born out of our research efforts. When it comes to water supply, that's my particular background. Anyone who's familiar with the Millennium Development Goals or the Sustainable Development Goals will appreciate that the way that those progress, or those indicators have been monitored is with respect to progress. It's a very binary thing. They're monitoring progress towards access to improved water. But they're not monitoring the performance of that infrastructure. Right, so our teams put together instrumentation plans. We instrument the infrastructure, and we start monitoring the performance of that infrastructure to better anticipate failure and to ensure sustainability. Right, so it's a little bit, again, of a different approach. And then something else that we've really employed are customer satisfaction surveys. That's what's going on in this particular picture here. Basically trying to utilize what's called a Likert scale, 1 to 5, in terms of levels of satisfaction around a particular initiative. So we talk to the households, we talk to the community members, and ask them about their satisfaction in terms of usually 3 or 4 areas of a particular development challenge. I think we have to be a little bit careful about monitoring and evaluation that includes data collection for the sake of data collection. I don't know if anyone else has seen this particular phenomenon in developing, in the development sector, where it's just collecting data for the sake of collecting data because you don't know what you're trying to, you don't know what you don't know or what you're trying to learn. And so a lot of the approaches that I've seen in the development humanitarian space is that they go into the data collection process without a very specific question that they're trying to address. And so they just start collecting data as much as they can. And then they're sitting on a bank of data that they don't know what to do with, right? Because they didn't start with the right approach. So we've used customer satisfaction surveys very, very specifically to address some of those things and identify some of the sustainability challenges. Okay, so I've been talking too long. It's the problem in any professor I tried to cram in an entire semester's worth of information into 30 minutes, so I apologize. But if we could, would it make sense to maybe in your groups share for 5 minutes your particular elements? Let me go back to this other, your particular best practices or characteristics. And then maybe after 5 minutes, every table can choose one just to share out with the rest of the audience and see if we can synthesize the room in 10 minutes. It'll be hard to do, but is that okay? Okay. It's your turn. Who wants to start? We'll go this way. Yeah? Okay. So share any ideas you have about?
Yeah, just share one experience before. When I was working in Malaysia, China before, and then we have a collaboration course with Peking University. Yeah, so they provide a master course of management to our staff, and then I think it's a because in most of our staff in China, we need to supply a office in mainland China, so that if we have more training on management, I think it's good for us to manage our office or our staff. So I think it's also maybe it's a credit to the university because it's a more practitioners they can join the course. It's just one experience. Thank you.
Anyone else from your table want to share anything? We can come back around over here. Mandarin is okay if you prefer to.
I would think that like credit bearing is one of the most important characteristics of service learning projects because it is like a incentives to students to join the course. If you are not credit bearing subjects, then student will be like, oh, why do I need to spend time on it, or why do I need to regardless I need to do my final year projects. I need to do my my major. Why do I need to spend time on this service project? So what are the benefits? I don't have benefits maybe. So if we make it into credit bearing subjects, just like in PolyU, then we will not only learning from the course, but we will not only study for the credit, but we will study also for our personal gains. Just like myself, I'm a student here, and then after completing the service learning course, we start a student initiative team to work in the project in Cambodia. So it's like more development on our personal gain instead of just to earn the credits for graduation. So I think it's a very good incentive for students. Thank you.
My name is Harry. I'm from Vietnam, NGO. So I think for me, I choose educational awareness because the service learning actually have two things: service and learning. So usually this is very difficult to balance because university and the NGO look in a different perspective. For the NGO, they always see about the service, like how much that the program can help them to achieve the mission for the beneficiary. And then for the other side, the university always think about how much that the student can learn. So I also was work in the university trying to bring the student to the NGO. And some of NGO really do not understand much about the service learning. They always ask about the service. So that's why the importance of the partner for the sustainable partnership between the service learning is whether the NGO they also have a knowledge or awareness about the education the purpose of the service learning, trying to provide the opportunity for the student to learn and develop. So that's one of the for me, is one of the very key elements for the sustainable partnership.
Others? Anyone else want to share? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Harry. My table, we have different experts from different countries. We have Myanmar, we have Cambodia, we have Philippines, we have Hong Kong. Myself from Hong Kong, my name is Raymond Poliu. I try to consolidate some idea, bring them together to be sustainable from my experience and also observation and understand. We need to understand partner values, what their needs, general needs, capacity of the server, the student. Also need a quite important coordinator. So we have the role of coordinator to connect all together. And also clarify the role of the partner, different role. All have to be set. And hopefully that repeat, continue, be sustainable. So we work with Harry, UEG, now UEG, number of years before HSU. We continue to work in coming summer. Thank you.
So spoken like a real person who has a lot of project management experience. Is that true?
Only 5 projects. One project, only 2 projects. One in Phnom Penh 5 years ago, and the second project, more sustainable over the last 4 years in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Work with local hospitality education school.
So our table have 3 parties, from engineer, volunteer, and the second one is from high institutes, and the other one is NGO with give community development skills. So these 3 parties, we think that the most important would be how we could have a common ground to solve social issues and bring positive impact. So we have engineer technical side, and also have the NGO side to have social service to prepare the ground. And the high institutes is the students, how they could learn through the process. We call it learning by doing. So during this service learning, we want the mentor, the engineer or technical side to help the students through the process. So I think that's the important.
So that's a new element there, that interdisciplinary type of nature of the work. Certainly is very obvious, I think. Coming from an engineering background, I think it's easy to kind of see the need for interdisciplinary groups. I'll speak for it.
Our group, we have 4 of our friends from Nankai University from the mainland China, and also we have 2 students here from Bolivia. So we have actually 2 parts. One is from the faculty part's perspective and students' perspective. And when we are talking about, we're discussing the topic, I think we are very much impressed by this kind of closed loop. Okay, it's a circle that integrates the students and teachers and community. Here community means society, local people. And we just integrated all them together into this project. And I think that's the future. That's the future solution to the, I think, 21st century education. Because we cannot just live individually or separately, and we are doing our own job, but finally we do nothing, we contribute nothing because our products are isolated. So I think this is really amazing idea, and we are very inspired by this kind of, we call it loop, because we have physics teachers here, they think that's a good idea. Okay, and secondly, what impressed me personally is that I heard several times phrases like we build up, we initiated, we explored, and we start to establish. Okay, sometimes as a teacher, we always complain too much because we always say, we don't have this, we don't have that. But what you impressed me is that I did volunteers for 3 years before we what. So thank you so much.
Okay.
I just thank you for the courageous spirit.
Of course.
Thank
So
you.
I'll just maybe synthesize some stuff with this table here. Theirs was, the priority was, one of the elements was trust.
Just
I think that's a good one also. And maybe I should just close out by thanking everyone for their positive energy here. It's really exciting to see everyone come together in this way, and just hope that we can perhaps continue the discussion outside of this session here, perhaps for the next few days. And believe me, I can talk for hours and hours and hours and hours about this. So please feel free to reach out to me and we can chat, and I'd love to hear more about what you're doing also. Any last comments? Okay. Thank you, everyone.